Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Family Sedan channel. Got a couple legal related stories to share with you in this latest tepid jam. I'll be starting with this one from the Crypto Basic. Top US lawyer says he doesn't see Judge Torres buying one of Ripple's arguments. And they're speaking about none other than attorney John Deaton, pictured here on your screen. And attorney Deaton's articulating why he believes that there's a particular argument Ripple's made that he thinks the judge, Judge Torres here, just isn't going to buy. But even so, he does believe that should this case get to the Supreme Court level, which I think we all hope doesn't happen, we'd love to have this all completely ended forever, much sooner than that. But if it does get to that level, he does think that the Supreme Court will buy the argument. He just doesn't think that Judge Torres specifically will. And then there's also this headline, also from the Crypto Basic, SEC reviewing its communication with JP Morgan about Ripple. There you go, SEC communicating with JP Morgan about Ripple. And this is something that's been going on for some time, but I haven't had an update on this story for, I don't even know, many, many months. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a legal or financial background of any kind. I am not offering legal or financial advice. And you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. All right, so into this first story. And attorney Deaton sharing his expectations and beliefs having to do with what he thinks will end up being the case, perhaps anyway, Ripple specifically losing on this argument, on a specific argument, which, by the way, just to be clear at the outset of this video, doesn't mean that he's changed his stance in terms of, you know, whether or not Ripple wins. That actually, the overall picture, that still hasn't changed. And if you're talking about an outright win, he still thinks that's way more probable with Ripple, if it's going to happen at all, but not with the SEC, frankly. Anyway, piece reads as follows. Deaton thinks Judge Torres will not accept one of Ripple's arguments, but he still thinks the company will win the lawsuit. As the crypto community continues to anticipate Ripple versus SEC's summary judgment, crypto law founder attorney John Deaton has identified one of the company's arguments that may not appeal to the judge in a podcast with Thinking Crypto. In Ripple's summary judgment motion, the company argued that if the SEC's case theory is granted, the court will indirectly accept that there can be an investment contract without a contract. So I was paused to note, when we finally saw, in the later part of 2022, Ripple's motion for summary judgment, their final real argument, here's what we got. That's when we first found out, to my recollection anyway, is that's when we first saw that, the big guns for them are effectively arguing, folks, we don't even need to talk about the Howey test first, because without, an investment and without a contract, there's no investment contract. So unless you're going to show that there's an investment contract, we don't even need to talk about the Howey test. And that was, for them, the primary argument. That's what's driving the case to this point, which I don't recall seeing anybody in our community guess would have been the case, but it is. And it has to do with case precedent, and I've talked about it ad nauseum, so not to go into in this video in any sort of greater detail. But that's directionally where things went. So, the question becomes ultimately, is Judge Torres going to find that compelling? And then additionally, if not, what does that mean in case there are appeals? Well, again, attorney Deaton hadn't been shy about saying, when it gets in, these arguments get to the Supreme Court, probably still going to look pretty good. But that's why the article said here, though, the court will indirectly accept that there can be an investment contract without a contract should such a scenario unfold here. Piece continues. Commenting on the case, attorney Deaton said the argument by Ripple is only stronger in the Second Circuit than in the First, Fifth, and Ninth Circuits. The crypto law founder noted that other courts outside the Second Circuit had found an investment contract without an underlying one. And so that's why it's so interesting, for most of us, including me, because most of us, we don't have any sort of legal background. And so it's just so interesting to see that from one circuit to the next, there are entirely different precedents here. And so understanding where all this is unfolding, well, that's the reason that Ripple argued what they argued. In a separate circuit where it had been found that there were investment contracts without an underlying contract, presumably that would have impacted Ripple's approach, right? But that's not the case here, which is very good for Ripple, and I think for XRP holders ultimately. Piece continues on. He pointed out that some judges have found an investment contract from a company's brochure to investors that made promises. It bears mentioning that the leading Silicon Valley blockchain company sent a brochure to about 100 potential investors in 2014. According to attorney Deaton, Judge Torres could find Ripple's approach as an offering. Although Ripple argued that the transaction did not constitute an investment contract, as there was no underlying contract, Deaton asserted that Judge Torres might not buy the argument. He, however, thinks the Supreme Court will accept the argument. And by the way, I will just say this, and Judge Torres, I get it. She's well within her rights to rule either way on that. It's her decision. But it would kind of burn my biscuits just a little tiny baby boo bit if she does rule in that direction, given it's the case that the SEC never cited specific transactions that they found as being illegal. They just said everything is. So if they get to say everything is, and then Judge Torres finds this very narrow sliver to have been something that's illegal, okay. But anyway, here's a quote from attorney Deaton. Ripple's argument is that is not enough because there is no underlying contract. I don't see Judge Torres buying that argument, although I see the Supreme Court accepting it, end quote. Despite commending the argument, he believes Judge Torres will not accept it just like the other judges at her level had done in the past. Quote, I think they're going to lose that argument with her. I hope I'm wrong, end quote. Attorney Deaton thinks Judge Torres' summary judgment will favor Ripple. Deaton explained that Ripple would win the lawsuit because the SEC's theory is too broad. And here's another quote from attorney Deaton. So if I had to pick one winner, if you said who's going to win, an outright win, SEC or Ripple, I would pick Ripple unopposed. A lot of people don't agree with me, but I'd pick Ripple because the SEC's theory is too overbroad, end quote. And so I'm certainly still optimistic, and I think that attorney Deaton's analysis regarding that particular aspect of how things might unfold, I think that makes a ton of sense. I don't feel 100% about anything, but I think that directionally the way he's looking at this, I think it makes a ton of sense, and that's what, to me, frankly, at this point in time, seems most probable. So I'm certainly very optimistic for how this thing's ultimately going to unfold, and we're going to know very soon. It's already April. This thing is not going to go undecided forever. There will be a day we wake up and the news is just there. And then there's this from the Crypto Basic. SEC reviewing its communication with JP Morgan about Ripple. Oh, yes. And so, again, this will be an update because I was covering this story. Just there hadn't been any developments, and I don't even remember how long because all the days blur together at this point. But months, at least. But anyway, Ashley Prosper, an XRP community member who filed a Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, that's FOIA, FOIA request last year demanding communications between SEC and JP Morgan involving Ripple, has updated XRP enthusiasts about recent progress. In a recent tweet, Prosper said the SEC had received the search results and is currently reviewing the documents. However, the securities regulator noted that a large number of the documents required confidential treatment. Quote, based on our initial review of the record, it appears that a large portion of the records will require we engage in the CT substantiation process, which involves records for which confidential treatment was requested at the time of their submission, end quote. So that was an excerpt from the email sent to Ashley. Piece continues. The Securities and Exchange Commission added that it will require an additional 60 days to the review time in order to engage in, quote, this type of consultation, end quote. So par for the course. Delay, slow. That's all we saw in the SEC v. Ripple case. That's just how they roll. Because what the hell does it matter to them how long all this takes? You know, if you're like just one of us out in the wild, just a citizen in the United States, seeking for the transparency which is legally required, frankly, well, if they're the ones that have to send out, what the hell do they care? Now, if you're on the flip side of that, and you want to make sure that, hey, because look, FOIA FOIA exists for a reason. It is to provide confidence in the system in general. And so if you're on the receiving side of the slowness of all this delay, all that's going to do is add more concern and question. And then similarly, when SEC's going after businesses, what the hell do they care there if it takes forever? Because then it's just the business that's languishing, and in theory, being financially harmed as a result of this, as would be the case in most instances, including what's happening with Ripple, obviously. What the hell does the SEC care? Which is why the whole approach is disgusting, but it is what it is. Pease continues. It is noteworthy that Prosper filed the FOIA request in August 2022, seeking disclosure of any communications between the SEC and JP Morgan about Ripple. Like several XRP community members, Prosper alleges that some private companies influenced the SEC's decision to go after Ripple in December 2020. Prosper filed the FOIA request because it believes the ongoing Ripple lawsuit started with communications between JP Morgan and the SEC. However, all efforts to have the SEC release the documents have yielded no positive results. In March, Prosper notified members of the XRP community that the SEC postponed the release of the document to the end of March. So this has been going on for some time here, and we'll see what ultimately happens. In terms of anything, any sort of ulterior motives, I appreciate that people are looking into it. I don't know, I'll believe it when I see it. Look, I don't want to get into the whole Charles Hoskinson grand conspiracy thing again. I actually legitimately do not want to talk about that right now. But if there is anything to this, again, I love that people are looking into this, and I do very genuinely mean that. But, if there really was some sort of effort to just squash Ripple, I will believe it when I see it. I just need the evidence. That's it. That's all I'm saying on that. That's really all I'm saying on that. And since we don't know, and everything does, there's all sorts of things that look peculiar, I just appreciate the efforts, people actually doing stuff here. So I'll keep you apprised of any developments that continue to unfold here, and there will be something at some point, even if it's not any sort of news of something breaking, in that way. Something's going to come on down, and I'll be happy to share with you at that point in time exactly what it is. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the Moon Family Sedan.